Welcome to Backyard Cigars, and welcome to the American Pride and Puro series, Part 7, where we'll be reviewing in American Puro the Fratello Balancing Act 1. And this cigar is an American Puro, although it is produced by La Aurora in the Dominican Republic. It is using a Connecticut Broadleaf wrapper, a Pennsylvania binder, and fillers from Connecticut and Pennsylvania. So this is a lighter shade of Connecticut Broadleaf being used here. And as you can see at the bottom, the footband indicates that this was a Cigar Club exclusive. And this was something of a joint venture with a Cigar Club and Omar de Frias of Fratello Cigars. And Omar de Frias is from the Dominican Republic, although he has quite an interesting story, one that we should talk a little bit about because it's kind of crazy. And then just see what this cigar is like. Now, Omar de Frias grew up in the Dominican Republic. He lived near a cigar store. He witnessed his grandfather and his family and friends sitting outside the store, smoking cigars. Eventually, he got the opportunity to go in and watch how a cigar was rolled. It was a cigar by La Aurora, and he never forgot it. And after that, almost immediately, the cigar bug hit him, or bit him. And he began to just become as knowledgeable as he could about anything cigar tobacco related. And learning how to smoke cigars and watching how they were rolled were all a part of his education. Now, mind you, it was almost as if he knew that someday he was going to have his own cigar company. Well, apparently, it's not just like that. It's actually that. He really did envision having his own cigar line down the road at some point in time. But he didn't want to go into it blind. He wanted to take a very calculated risk. And he straddled that line between, are you crazy? And, man, I can see how you've done a lot of work here to know that you're doing the right thing. In other words, whereas in some stories, some cigar makers just kind of grab their belongings, $5 in their pocket, and just search out the dream and build it, he kind of wanted to have a landing pad in case things went wrong. He wanted to have a support system behind him to make sure that things went according to plan. And he did not want to have to deal with, struggling in poverty as he approached his dream. Of course, in the conditions for some other cigar makers, many other cigar makers who fled Cuba, it was a different situation. It wasn't a situation where these men who had probably a good amount of savings in Cuba and at some point well off for a few, it wasn't as if they could just go to the bank, get all their money in one shot and just take off. It was a lot more difficult. So they were forced to leave with $5 in their pocket and some seeds and a dream, right, of doing something once they got to the United States, which wasn't necessarily making cigars for many at first. It was just make a living and pay the rent so that then you could think about possibly pursuing your craft, your career, what you did as a professional in Cuba. And now you're in the United States pursuing a different type of dream. But for most, it still led back to cigars. And for Omar, it led back to cigars. But let's follow on his journey here, because he graduated from the University of Puerto Rico, and from then on, he went thinking about what to do next. He got a job at NASA. So at NASA, he was a project, I believe, a project engineer or a project manager of some sort, analyst. He was a big shot, and he had a reputation for problem solving. So he was very good at what he did for a living, and he made a lot of money. Six figures, over $200,000 with an insane amount of benefits. And I'm not even sure if he worked there for nearly 12 years. So he's definitely vested in the pension. And then, so in 2013, he decided he was going to, do something official. But previous to that, mind you, for over a decade, he's been researching, looking at the numbers, looking at supply chain, how he's going to do this, how he's going to do that. Every facet of the company, he's just trying to work everything out. And he meets a name by the name of Jose Blanco. Most stories go like that, by the way. And I met a guy by the name of Jose Blanco, and the rest is history. I start making cigars, or I start contracting someone to make cigars for me, and I start blending these cigars. Well, for Omar de Frias, it wasn't that different. He met with Jose Blanco. Jose Blanco set up a meeting between him and Hoya de Nicaragua, and the owners and founders of that company. And eventually they met up with him, and I believe at the time they weren't making as many cigars, so they had some gaps to fill. But they had a lot of suitors. So Omar de Frias says that they met up with him. They smoked cigars, talked cigars, but eventually they started talking about many other topics that had nothing to do with cigars. And they just wanted to get to know him so that they could size him up as, is he the real deal? Is he really passionate about cigars? But more importantly, is he someone that we can work with? Like, what kind of man is he? Educated man? Yes, he's an educated man. Is he a nice guy? Yes, he's a nice guy. Is he well prepared? Yes, he's well prepared. Can we foster this relationship? And they did. And so Fratello Cigars was born in 2013 and began to have their cigars made in Nicaragua. In 2016, this is the crazy part, Omar de Frias quits his job at Nassau. $200,000 a year, plus benefits and bonuses. And mind you, at Nassau already he was known as the cigar guy. He's the type of guy that with every little project that they accomplished, he'd whip out a cigar. And this story was in the Washington Post as well. And so it seemed fitting that he was leaving this really nice job, comfy job, for his passion, because he came back to his original love. Now he had a nice nest egg, he had some benefits, he had done a lot of research, he was well prepared. Now had been 3 years, he's been in business with Hoya de Nicaragua, things were going well, sales were increasing, the cigars marketing was very good. Boutique label, yes, but with the backing of Hoya de Nicaragua, it was stable. He seemed secure. So in 2016, he quit his job. Now, this particular cigar, full disclosure here, right upon examining it before the video, I noticed that there was a huge crack. But it's only a wrapper crack. It doesn't go down to the binder. So I filled it up really well before I lit it with some cigar glue, and it's holding up fairly well. There's a little wrinkling towards the bottom of the scar, and I don't believe it's in any way impeding the cigar's performance at this moment. Good burn line right now, fairly mild, some cedar, some mild sweetness. That's about it. But back to Omar de Frias, very intelligent man, very well prepared man. And now he has this particular cigar he has made at La Aurora. It's part of his love for cigars, right? That first La Aurora cigar. For some other individuals, it might be that first Cuban cigar, or either because that's where you grew up in Cuba, or somehow somewhere down the line you smoked a Cuban cigar and you loved it, and a love affair was born. But the Cigar Club and Omar de Frias decided that they wanted to do something very different for Balancing Act #1, and that was an American Puro. So happy 4th of July, everyone. This is a very big holiday for many people in the United States. I hope everyone in the United States, because it needs to be celebrated. Our democracy, our independence, it needs to be celebrated. And what better way to celebrate it than with an American cigar? Although it is made in the Dominican Republic, it is still an American Puro by the tobacco specs listed. If you want an American Puro, a double, I don't know if you want to call it double Puro or whatever, but I'm just saying that it's an American Puro through and through. But if you want an American Puro made in the United States, then you have to try out the J.C. Newman, the American, or just check out any of the cigars listed in the American Pride and Puro series that I have published and posted over the last 2 years. Some are very exceptional, and we'll see how this one stacks up. Now here's an article very quickly from the Lakeland Ledger, April 21st, 1995, and it says here Marvin Shanken and his Cigar Aficionado magazine. It's Shanken, the son of a New Haven, Connecticut jewelry retailer, rolled out Cigar Aficionado in September 92, just as the premium cigar boom in the United States was beginning. The magazine soon became sort of a town and country for cigar smokers, featuring photos and profiles of cigar-chomping celebrities. What is especially galling to American cigar makers is Shanken's ratings of the best smokes, in which Cubans always come out on top. In the spring issue, Shanken rates Coronas, and indeed Cuban brands received the top 2 scores. The top American Corona, La Gloria Cubana, finished 16th. And basically it goes on to talk about how American cigar makers were very displeased with the ratings and how they were getting the shaft from Cigar Aficionado magazine. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. American cigar growers, makers, companies are very, very protective of their leaf. Whenever there is a competitive leaf, there seems to be this, reaction from a lot of individuals within the American tobacco industry. And rightfully so. You have to protect your turf, right? And you have to stand your ground and be assertive in the fact that, look, there's great tobacco coming from a lot of different places. The largest exporter of cigar tobacco or raw tobacco is Brazil. And the second is the United States. So the largest producer of tobacco is, of course, China. And then I believe it's India and then Brazil. I'm not sure, but that is tobacco. Yes, most of it is tobacco for cigarettes. We know that. But it still counts. All tobacco, all raw tobacco. And we export something, I think it's a little under $1 billion worth. It's maybe more, right? I don't have all the figures and statistics in front of me right now. I didn't really want to make that video that technical and boring. I just kind of wanted to get you to understand that the American tobacco that is now is some of the best in the world and has been for a long, long time. When there was a shortage in Cuba due to the Cuban embargo, and there was the shortage experienced in the United States, during that time, there was a bit of a revival or renaissance of American tobacco in many different regions across the United States. Not that they hadn't been making tobacco in these places, but the demand increased because there was a vacuum that needed to be filled. There was a gap, a void. And American tobacco, as well as tobacco from Puerto Rico, tobacco from the Philippines, really filled that shortage. And then eventually from the Dominican Republic, Central America. It's a mild, slightly sweet, mineral earth, and some cedar. It's pleasant. This is courtesy of a package sent to me by Daniel Ravanelli of 505 Cigar. And thank you, Daniel, for this cigar. Daniel actually mentioned to me this would be the next chapter in your American Pride and Puro series. And I thought that was additionally thoughtful of him to actually know that and say, hey, look, I've got a cigar that could extend that series. Because, I'll say it again, Gran Habano and George Rico never replied to my email to see if they had any remaining, I believe it's an American Puro that they made for some time, several years ago. If you don't have any, it's fine, but just let me know. But anyway, I'm kidding. It's not a big deal. I have this to share on the 4th of July. Beautiful holiday. A beautiful country that makes awesome tobacco in the Connecticut Valley, in Florida. Used to make a lot of great binder tobacco in Wisconsin. And you had some tobacco grown in Georgia. And of course, the great tobacco that was grown originally in Virginia, and just, you know, the tobacco fields in North Carolina. I know not all of that tobacco gets grown and for the purpose of cigars, but there was a time that, yes, in those places, the intent was to make tobacco for cigars, and some maybe for some cigarettes, because it was big money. But in Connecticut has always been a special place. In Pennsylvania has been another very special place for the broadleaf variety there. And you know, you think it has such a long and rich history dating back so far, and it rivals the history to some degree. Rivals the history of Cuba's industry. Not with in the sense that it ever made the finest cigars known to man as Cuba is known for, but in its tenacity, in its ability to continue and prosper and stay afloat despite, you know, economic shifts, despite a change in palate, and despite, you know, the boom, the cigar boom, and the boom that there was in the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua as well. And when these regions exploded and everyone wanted to make a Nicaraguan cigar, use Nicaraguan Ligero, and or set up shop in the free zone, or have someone in the free zone make cigars for them, which is great because everyone loved the free zone. Everyone still loves the free zone. But you couldn't forget about the Connecticut Valley tobacco growers. You couldn't forget about the Pennsylvania and the Amish making their tobacco. You just couldn't forget about those regions. There was this nostalgia attached to them. And to this day, there still remains a great amount of love for American tobacco. Just ask J.C. Newman. Or you can ask me, and I can tell you that, look, when Connecticut Shade became a thing, because originally they were growing the tobacco in the sun grown in Connecticut. And when that Connecticut shade came about, man, it was like it hit like a boom. I mean, it just like a loud clap of thunder, because here was this golden shine. I mean, smooth looking wrapper. It just, the aesthetics were so pleasing, and it did rival the Cuban cigar wrapper, the Corojo. It rivaled it in so many ways. It offered flavor, but at the same time, it was great blending different tobaccos with that particular cigar wrapper, or using Cuban filler, or using Puerto Rican and Cuban filler together with a binder from Wisconsin or Ohio, and cigar wrapper from the Connecticut River Valley. I mean, some of the best cigars were made that way, and the American palate loved it. They consumed so many cigars. Once that Cuban shortage hit, the demand for that American cigar was just there. It was a prime opportunity. Florida, in their operation, getting up off the ground and doing what they did, and of course, some of this came with help from Cuban growers that had, come to America and wanted to be a part of the renaissance that was occurring, or the revival, if you want to call it that. It's just a wonderful time in history for American tobacco. When I look back in the archives and I read the stories, and just, the exclamation points attached to certain articles in regards to sales increasing and crops increasing, and the yields, and the success of the Connecticut shade wrapper. And to this day, it's still world famous, and no one can disregard. Yeah, it's expensive, but look, it is primo wrapper. So if you want the good stuff, you have to pay the good stuff price. I'm just experiencing the finer points of American tobacco here. That it's a nice, sweet, sort of cookie dough, slightly mineral earth tobacco flavor. It's got nice notes of cedar. It is mild to now becoming more of a medium strength cigar, but and medium bodied. It's smooth. It offers very little bit of spice in the finish. It's got a decent aroma, nothing crazy, decent. It's got a good retrohale if you're interested in that, and it's quite pleasing at the moment. I think for some of us, we might say this is a very good morning cigar, or just for your first cigar of the day, it'd be very good. It's burning very well. I've had no issues with any kind of burn line or touch-ups of any kind. It's been very good. I have to report that the prep work that I put in, filling in the crack that I noticed with the glue, has really paid off, because the crack has not expanded. It has not shifted in any way. It hasn't set off any kind of domino effect in the cigar whatsoever. And again, it hasn't affected the burn line one bit. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm very happy about that. I just ashed it right now, and it's smoking fairly well, because it's a slow burner. And although the specs that I quoted indicated Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, and I did say that it appears to be a lighter shade of Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, which does exist, and I have seen and smoked and reviewed. I'm not entirely sure. It could just be a Connecticut shade wrapper, but because it seems just a tad bit darker, it could be that it's just a much lighter version of a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. We'll go with what they say, right? Good smoke output, good draw. Nothing crazy going on here, but I'm just pleased with the overall performance of the cigar, and it is sort of nostalgic for me. I've smoked a lot of American Puros during my research for the American Pride and Puro series, this being part 7, and I bought multiples of each of those cigars so that I could experience them over and over again. And when I finally did reviews, I would be talking about the cigar, knowing that I've smoked it several times. In this case, this is the one and only of the cigar that I am smoking in the first time, of course. And I don't have a memory of it, so I can't go back and compare it. But it is very similar to some of the American Puros that I smoked in the series, early chapters. And it's kind of mellow, very mild at the start, very mild up until maybe this latter part of the second half of the second third, and there you get a little bit more of that medium, and with the cedar touches and the sweetness that comes through and the light spices. Very tasty. On the 4th of July, I drink American beer, and I smoke a couple of American cigars. Not saying I won't smoke a different cigar throughout the course of the day, but I start my day off with American tobacco. I try to finish it that way as well. And it's just a tradition for me, things that I do to celebrate the occasion. You don't have to do that, but I would recommend that you should try out some American Puros and see what you think of them. If anything, just to say that you did. And this cigar right now, really, in the final third, it's still slightly sweet. Hint of baking spices in the finish. Milder notes of cedar. A general sweet tobacco earthiness that isn't overpowering. It's just subtle enough to let you know that it's there. Pleasant and smooth smoke, full of flavors. And I can definitely recommend this cigar. Omar de Frias took a big risk in leaving behind a comfy job and starting his own cigar company, his own cigar lines. And to me right now, just smoking this one, I can say that he should be very proud of his decision, and he's living the dream. He's living the dream. So I'm liking it down to the finish. I will smoke it down to the nub. Man, I'd love to see how they smoke in a Toro or even a double Robusto. But I'm loving this cigar. I think it's pretty good. I think it's a really good morning cigar. It's an early morning for me right now, so it is my morning cigar. And I want to thank you all for watching this episode and chapter of the American Pride and Puro series with a Fratello American Puro. So thank you very much, and thank you to Daniel again for the sample. Till next time on Backyard Cigars.